Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I hope those of you coming in can find seats in the dark back there. My name is Steve Howard. I'm the Chief Executive at Business in the Community, and we are delighted to have you here this morning for the first of what we hope become many responsible business summits. An action-packed 2 days. Lots going on in this space, around these halls, downstairs with the exhibition. I think at last count we have 41 countries represented with us over the next 2 days, and many thousands passing through these halls, so it will be great. We are doing this in conjunction with UBM, a new partnership, so we look forward to seeing how all of this unfolds. We're learning as we go a little bit, which is always exciting as well, but we are really excited about what's in store for us over these next 2 days. If you've seen the delegate list, an amazing collection of people that we are. If you look at the titles, marketing, purchasing, environment, HR, comms, supply chain, policy directors, CEOs, MDs, CSR professionals, a wide range of people wanting to take an interest in these subjects and think a little bit more about what it is we're doing and that call to action that we need to end with as we finish. Now let me first thank our sponsors. As always, we thank so much Hitachi and Deloitte as our lead sponsors and headline sponsors for this event, but also the other sponsors that we will cycle through here: 3i, Addison Lee, AirsWeb, Allianz Boots, Corporate Culture, the Institute for Chartered Accountants, Power Perfector, Veolia, Vocal Inc. We couldn't do this without all of you. And we'll have an opportunity to hear more from those organizations and learn a bit more about what they're doing as the 2 days unfold. The other thing I'd like to do is to welcome our new members. One of the things we're trying to do at all of our big set pieces now is welcome the people that have joined the Business in the Community movement since we were last all together, and we last did this at our annual meeting in December with the Prime Minister and the Prince talking about his big society ideas. The Prime Minister has come back to that in a moment. So if we could welcome the new members into Business in the Community. We're delighted that you joined us, becoming part of this movement. Many of you are in this room, and we welcome you, so thank you very much. Now, what is it that we're hoping to do and achieve over these next couple of days? Well, part of it is to share this collective vision for the sustainable future. What does that mean? How do we make that real? How do we help skeptical people understand the opportunities as well as the threats that lurk in there? We hope that this becomes a point of inspiration for you and something that you can take back to your organizations to spread that inspiration. Practical ideas, practical case studies about how we do transform business and transform communities, and how through all of that you create value within your own organizations to do it. We've got a number of leading thinkers with us. You will hear from some of those in just a moment. A great lineup of people talking about big issues, important issues, big ideas that I think have relevance to all of us. We've got some important pieces of research that are coming out on this whole idea of visioning for the future and transforming business, on what community footprints look like. How do you use a rigorous and tested methodology of saying what is our impact locally and how do we make the most of that? Some research that has come out in conjunction with Cranfield University on the business case behind all of this. Why bother doing all of that? Also, we are celebrating the European Year of Volunteering Awards in the venue tonight as well, so an awful lot going on. Now, the themes that will run through all of this, of course, is that this stuff is complex. It isn't easy. Simple soundbite solutions won't work. We know that. You've all heard me say this before. The foundation of all of this is this notion that humanity shares a common fate on a crowded planet. We are all in this together, and world events are making that point all the more clear to us as every minute goes by. The notion of sustainability, when you peel back that onion skin, goes back to those foundational principles of social justice and environmental stewardship. How does that tie in to our business models and our organizations, and what should we do with that as leaders? And ultimately, we can talk about that all we want. We know that we've got to approach this whole problem differently, don't we? New forms of collaboration, new ways of cooperating, words that are easy to use, chatting with some of our other speakers this morning. We all talk about collaboration. The reality is it is very, very difficult to do in practice, and we know that. And the context in which we gather this morning is, needless to say, an uncertain one, an unpredictable one. We watch with bated breath what's happening in Japan as they battle those nuclear reactors, the heroism of the people that perhaps are sacrificing their lives to work in those factories to bring them under control. But also what's happening in the Middle East and the impact that that will have around the world, certainly in this economy. I learned a new word yesterday. And I think this comes from the American military, but the new word is VUCA, V-U-C-A. And you would say it, the situation is VUCA. Now that sounds rather obscene, but what it stands for, V-U-C-A, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Well, that sort of feels like today, doesn't it? And we've got our own issues here at home, of course. Uncertain economic circumstances, massive public sector spending cuts that will have an impact on everybody who lives in this land, particularly the charitable sector, particularly people that live further north in this country, realistically. We are still facing this situation where most people don't trust us. They don't trust business. They certainly don't trust financial services. They're not sure they trust the government. They don't really trust anybody. And that makes our lives all the more complicated. At the same time, this social media world that we live in, the fact that information spreads, that countries can fall in a matter of days based on social media networks, information, correct and incorrect, can spread in a nanosecond. People are tweeting and doing all the other things you do on those medium as we speak right now about this event. How does that play into what it is we're trying to do? Uncertain times indeed. But I mentioned to somebody this morning, somebody showed me a copy of the Sunday Times from 30 years ago last weekend. So I can think it was March 10th or 11th, 1981. And you know what the lead stories were in the Sunday Times then? Chancellor preparing shock budget, big squeeze coming. Business wants lower taxes on jobs and less red tape. Government closing non-dom tax loopholes. I'm a non-dom, that's kind of important to me. And finally, public sector unions gearing up for a strike. So some things perhaps never change in all of this. And now we have the big society. What does that mean to this agenda? What does that mean to those of us living in this country and our sense of personal as well as corporate responsibility in all of this? Is this a slogan? Is this government spin? Is this air cover for public sector spending cuts? Or perhaps, like those headlines of 30 years ago, something that we really know has been with us for a while that we perhaps just forgot to do a little bit? Is it about cutting supply of government services, or is it perhaps thinking a little bit differently about the demand for those services and how we as the business community and people who take a real interest in our communities can respond to all of that? Now, we've listened to you, our members, and wider stakeholders in terms of what are the things that matter most to you? What is it you would like to achieve in a gathering like this one? What are some of the other big issues you're facing? And we hear a pretty consistent message. Short term, you're worried about how do you engage your employees differently? How do you integrate these things? How do you tackle some of these governance and trust issues that you're facing? But as we look forward a little bit, what are the things you're worried about for next year and the year after that? It is what we hope are the essence of the subject matter of this conference. How do you manage your supply chain in this changing world? How do you rethink your business models in a low-carbon environment? And how does that impact on your products and services and your relationships? How do you help your customers and wider stakeholders understand all of this, to whether it's to be willing to pay for it or to support you? The message I hear consistently from leaders is, when we're talking about these issues, is they all say the same thing. We know this is important. We do quite a bit in our company, they tell themselves, but we know, honestly, that we need to do more. And when you say, well, why not? Why aren't you doing more? The answer, again, is very consistent. One, it's all so complicated. We don't know where to start. So, message to us as a movement, how do we make this simple? How do we make this journey more straightforward? Second message we hear, all of the conflicting priorities we face as leaders, whether it's strategic priorities or financial priorities, all conflicting with one another. How do we work our way through all of that? Probably a bit related to the first. And then the third point is, you know, though our wider stakeholder group, and particularly for listed companies, some of our shareholders don't quite understand this, don't see the relevance to our business. So what that tells me in part is that we have to work a little bit more creatively on how we get this messaging out there, how we help people understand that responsible business is part of being a successful business, that you create value in your organization by living your values. The business case, the logic that we've talked about time and again in terms of building and protecting your brand, engaging your people, particularly in times of uncertainty when everybody is anxious. So you hold on and you develop those people and you make it an attractive place to work, how you manage your risk, how you seize opportunity. And notwithstanding all the turmoil that's out there, there are loads of opportunities, and some are going to find them and some are going to miss them. And how do you use this agenda to unlock that? And that's what we're trying to do at Business in the Community. How can we help you on this journey? How can we make sure that we are creating that sustainable future for everyone? We stand for responsible business. And what does that mean? How do you take these ideas and actually integrate them into your business in a way that really matters, both in terms of how you engage with your communities, but also how you manage your supply chain, how you create those diverse and healthy workplaces that are out there, how you treat the planet, and how does all this come together in some sort of coherent way, which is why we're so happy to see so many different disciplines represented in the room today. Touched on the big society a little bit, and we're trying to stay away from some of the political jargon, but when we at Business in the Community think about what that means, and we talk to the Prime Minister and others in government about what we might do as a business community, it does come down to some kind of practical ideas. The Prime Minister challenged us with that notion that he would like to see every business commit to do some things in terms of treating the environment a little bit differently and tackling our carbon, creating the skills and the jobs that we know we all need, particularly young people coming out of this country, to rethink a little bit how we engage in communities in a very local way, not the national top-down stuff, but very local. And by the way, who better to do that than us, who have this national and local and international presence when you look around the people that are in this room today. How do we nurture small businesses through our supply chains? How does that sense of well-being then drive through, whether it's flexible working or this notion of an opportunity and people having aspiration? How can we as businesses play a part in that? And we think we can. We're very excited about it. We've got an idea that we're building on called Business Connectors, which will be, when it's done, 1,000 business brokers effectively around the land who will work in very local communities, helping bring these people together, the ideas, the business community, the social needs, the opportunity to unlock all of that talent and emotion that's out there. We know people want to get involved. My experience, as is yours, most people get up in the morning wanting to do the right thing. They want to help. They just need a little bit of encouragement and guidance in terms of how best to do that. So we are going to roll out our full arsenal of tools, Seeing is Believing visits, ideas, conferences, publications, sharing, strong leadership to go around and look at those things that really work. You tell us that you're up for more community engagement, but you also tell us, let's not keep inventing things. Let's find the things that work and let's replicate them. Let's take them out there and bring them to scale. And we need to do it now more than ever. So very exciting stuff for us in that sense. Let me get on here because we're running slightly behind schedule. One final point on the community side of things, of course, was we think about what does transforming communities mean. We think of it in terms of education, in terms of employment, in terms of enterprise, in terms of environment, all interconnected things. What role can we play? There was an interesting piece of research that has come on the back of the Lord Davis report talking about women on boards. Practical thing, we've got what we hope is a really helpful guide that you can use to say, okay, good idea, but how do I make that a reality in my own business? How do organizations do it? What is my role as a leader? So I would suggest that you take a quick look at that before we break. But we're really going to spend most of our time in these next 2 days saying, so what does all this mean in the context of sustainability? What does that word mean? It's used and abused and confused out there. How do we make it real? If it were easy, as I said in the beginning, we wouldn't need to be here today. We'd all be off doing something else. It is a challenging environment. You are all managing through turbulence, and sorry to say this, it is going to get more turbulent, not less turbulent, over the next 18 months. But it also says to me that if we don't step up as the business community, and in fact as the international and global business community that we are, if we don't lead now, who is? Who's going to do that? This is why we are here. This is why Business in the Community exists for times just like this. So we hope you have an exciting and interesting time. There's an awful lot to learn and share and challenge. We hope you make relationships that will last. We hope you take ideas home. We hope that you share those ideas with us so we can spread these notions of good practice. Our job in the end is to help you make the case, to spread those ideas of best practice out there, to support you in the journey that you're on, and to put you in touch with others who are living in what can be sometimes rather lonely places. I know. So anyway, on with that. It is now my pleasure to invite our first keynote speaker of the session, Peter Mather, who is European Vice President and Head of Country in the UK for BP. Peter, please.
Great, Stephen, thanks very much. It's great to be here at actually such an important conference, and as you say, Stephen, an important conference at an important time. As a contribution to our discussions today on responsible business, I want to talk about challenges and responsibilities. The challenges faced by my company, by my industry, and to a certain extent by all of us, and the responsibilities that we have as we face these challenges. I just want to start by talking a little bit about last year. In 2010, our company was involved in an accident that triggered a major spill and which led the United States government to shut down the deepwater drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, but most importantly, cost the lives of 11 men. And no matter what else we remember about that accident, that will always remain our most grievous loss, the lives of friends and family members. So we face an enormous challenge today to earn back trust, the trust of the communities where we operate, our employees, our shareholders, our regulators, those that govern us, and our customers, of course. But we're determined we will once again restore this trust, and we realize this requires actions, not words. There are many actions we're taking, and there are many actions we think our industry needs to take based on what we have learnt since this accident. Last month, after we announced our annual results, one magazine ran a headline saying, "BP wraps up year to forget." Actually, that's not how we see it at all. Let me assure you, we will not ever forget 2010. Often the response to a tragedy or a major setback defines the character of an organization. And we are determined that we will emerge from this accident as a company that is safer, stronger, more sustainable, more trusted, and in time, more valuable. As well as meeting our commitments in the United States, we have a duty to take what we have learnt deeply into the fabric of our own organization. It means strengthening the way we manage our operations and concentrating on the things that drive long-term value: safety, capability, technology, portfolio choices, and relationships. And we have a number of responsibilities in this regard. We have a responsibility to the people of the Gulf Coast states of the United States, who are still feeling the after effects of the spill. We have a responsibility to the United States in general, and we're under no illusions about the task involved in rebuilding trust there. We have a responsibility to our employees, giving them renewed reasons to believe in the company they work for. We have a responsibility to our industry colleagues, so they can have confidence in us as a partner going forward. We have a responsibility to share what we've learned, to demand more of ourselves and from our industry overall. And of course, we have a responsibility to our shareholders, to our owners, to renew their faith in the value of the company, their company, and its ability to operate safely. So how are we meeting these responsibilities? Last year's crisis involved a response which included 48,000 people, 6,500 vessels, and 125 aircraft. That phase, thankfully, is over, but we're still very much in action in the Gulf, where we're going beyond, well beyond our legal obligations to do what is right. The Joint Incident Management Team is completing its response activities, and our Gulf Coast Restoration Organization is working towards the longer-term environmental and economic restoration of the affected areas. We've paid out over $5 billion to meet claims by individuals, businesses, and governments, and the natural resources damages assessment process is well underway. We continue to have a local presence through our state offices and our staff. We're supporting initiatives to promote tourism, as well as seafood testing and marketing. We have also voluntarily funded investment research to help restore the unique environment of the Gulf Coast, including an investment of $500 million in the Gulf of Mexico Research Initiative. Our internal investigation into the causes of the accident was completed last September, and we made that public in early September of last year. And we continue to cooperate with all the other inquiries that are in progress. But our responsibilities stretch further than the Gulf of Mexico. We have a responsibility to embed the learning from this accident across BP's global operations. And we're taking a series of steps to this end. We've created a powerful central safety and operational risk organization. This organization has the resources and the mandate to drive safe, reliable, and compliant operations, including significant intervention rights across BP's global business. Strengthening safety and earning trust are the foundations on which we will build a new value proposition for BP, designed to create value for the long term in a manner that is both safe and sustainable. And as I'm sure what will come as welcome news to many of you in the room, we're also resuming payment of a quarterly dividend. We are divesting non-strategic assets. We're investing in strategic projects in Russia, in India, in Brazil, in China, and elsewhere, with a very rich upstream portfolio. And we're increasing our investment in our exploration business. So having given you some insight into the specific challenges facing us at BP, let me stand back now and address the bigger challenges facing the energy industry. Energy is, of course, pivotal to our future. A reliable supply of affordable energy drove the industrial revolutions in Europe and in America, and it's now doing the same in Asia and in other parts of the developing world. Without energy, mankind loses heat, light, and mobility. Without energy, without enough energy, Europe and America cannot sustain the current standards of living, although we clearly can do this so much more efficiently than we are doing today. And without energy, the big developing nations, especially the twin giants of China and India, can never attain the living standards they quite understandably believe are also their right. So let's be clear about what all this means. Back in January, BP published our Energy Outlook 2030, looking at likely world energy trends. We estimate that by 2030, the world could be consuming as much as 40% more energy than it does today. That is the equivalent of adding today's United States energy consumption to world demand nearly twice over again. Meeting that demand will require investments of some 25 to 30 trillion dollars, more than $1 trillion per year over the next 20 years. And it's not just a question of meeting growing demand. We have to do so without destroying the environment, which involves reducing energy use and carbon emissions per unit of GDP. At present, the trends for both of these are pointing in the wrong direction. But this growth won't be coming from the United States, not so much from Europe. Almost all of it, we estimate over 90%, will come from the emerging economies, in particular China and India, Brazil, Russia. Paradoxically, whilst we become less dependent on oil, increasing overall demand for energy means that we will still need to find more of it. And we shouldn't forget the role of natural gas here. In fact, the fastest growing of the fossil fuels as we look forward. Supplies of natural gas are plentiful. The environmental impact is far less than coal, for example, and it is proven over many decades to be a secure and affordable source of energy, both in the power sector and directly into people's homes and businesses. With many of the world's major hydrocarbon basins now in decline, our industry will thus have no choice but to look to new and increasingly challenging frontiers. These include controversial areas such as the Arctic, unconventional resources, and yes, deep water exploration. Right now, the deep water provides an estimated 7% of the world's oil supply, rising to a projected 9% by the end of this decade. Blazing new trails always carries risk. At BP, we believe that our capability and our experience in operating at the frontiers gives us a continuing role in helping to meet this emerging world energy demand. But we will be doing this with a sense of great care and responsibility. One of our roles as a company is to help the world meet that increasing demand for secure, affordable, and sustainable energy. So you can summarize the 4 key challenges shaping the future of energy as follows: the growth of demand, the challenges of supply, energy security, and the environmental imperative. The work on demand shows us that the world is going to need, frankly, all the energy it can lay its hands on, at least in the medium term, from the widest range of geographical and material sources. And all sources of energy will have to be delivered as efficiently as possible if we are to avoid the economic and environmental consequences of rising prices and increased global emissions. On the supply side, renewables will grow quickly. That's good news, faster than any other energy sector. But they'll grow from a very low base. They'll grow at around 8% a year, we believe, out to 2030. But that will still not place them anywhere close to the major fossil fuel sources of supply by 2030. There are other exciting developments in energy. Biofuels. Biofuels will grow rapidly to contribute around 5 to 10% of liquid fuels globally, we believe. But oil and gas will thus remain indispensable to energy supply over the next 2 decades, while energy not supplied from these sources will be very largely provided by coal in plentiful supply in many of the developing nations. These challenges of supply are certainly not getting any easier. We estimate that simply to meet projected oil demand while replacing lost production from mature fields in the next 20 years, the world will need to find some 50 million barrels a day of new production, and that's equivalent to around 4 new Saudi Arabias. But there's no reason to panic about this, provided we act now in securing new resources while also driving for much better fuel economy. The oil and gas is there to enable us to meet this target, but there is no doubt that finding and producing it in the deep waters, for example, is getting more difficult and more costly. The third key challenge, energy security, is a subset of the supply issue. That too is coming into sharper relief as a result of recent economic and geopolitical events. It's a well-known facet of the oil and gas market that the significant centers of production and of consumption are in different places. As demand continues to rise and supply gets more difficult, energy security is bound to become an increasing concern. It's certainly the most important energy issue in the United States. Another reason why the Gulf of Mexico is so sensitive. The significant developments of new technologies such as shale gas extraction in the US may mitigate the security concerns to some extent for heat and power, but the security issues associated with oil and transport fuels remain acute. The emergence of leading economic players such as China and India, neither in fact over-endowed with domestic energy resources, accentuates this point. It has prompted some observers to worry about possible conflict over scarce resources between the major powers. The fourth and final challenge I mentioned is the environmental imperative. Here too, we have reached an important juncture in this particular debate about how to avert potentially catastrophic climate change. There is a pretty broad consensus around the world that if we are going to meet growing energy demand without drastically increasing environmental risks, we need to act to curb man-made carbon emissions. The question is, of course, exactly how. And recent events have also reminded us of some of the other challenges we face in the energy industry: political instability, high prices, and the impact of natural disasters and the impact they can have on energy infrastructure, and of course the effect of public and political opinion on the energy choices we're going to have to make. So in summary, there are challenges for BP, there are challenges for our industry, and for all of us as we seek to meet growing energy demand, there are challenges. Addressing these issues is central to geopolitics, technological progress, and to our economic future. But the danger is clear. If we fail to meet these challenges, we will not secure the affordable energy the world needs to continue on the path of peaceful economic growth. And we could face more conflict and the potential for environmental damage and economic chaos. So the final point I want to leave you with is that one vital key to meeting all these challenges, and Stephen referred to this earlier, is partnership. Partnership between nations to chart policy courses that are aligned and not in conflict. Partnership, not protectionism. Partnership between public and private sectors to create a stable and predictable environment for investment. Partnership between technologists and those with the resources to apply technology, and so on. But the world has overcome challenges before, and there's no reason why it shouldn't do it again. Thank you very much.
Peter, thank you. Now, before we invite our panel up, and Peter will be here after the panel as well, so we can ask him some further questions, but we have time for a question or two before we move on to the next phase. So if anyone would like to ask a question, I can't see anybody in the dark. We have some microphones around here. Hands up anywhere, shout out if I can't see you, or if not, we will catch up with that in a moment and we will move to, here's a question over here. If we have somebody with a microphone, or just boom it out and we'll repeat it.
Both is the answer. The Chinese, for example, are looking at their future energy demands in an incredibly responsible way. There's a sort of myth out there that the Chinese are hell-bent on just producing energy and increasing emissions, and they don't really give a damn. That's absolutely not the case. So, for example, in China, they're looking at everything, obviously, from nuclear, from different ways of using methane gas, whether it's coal bed methane or natural gas. The solar business is alive and well in China, but they're also looking at ways of decarbonizing coal because, of course, China is very well endowed with future coal supplies. So they're very keen to work with companies like ours on the prospect of carbon sequestration, which is effectively where you take the CO2 out of the fossil fuel and put it back down under the ground where it once came from. So I think there is a full range of investments going on. India, for example, we've just announced the largest single foreign investment into India, and that's on the natural gas side. The natural gas market in India is still relatively underdeveloped, but with growing population and growing demand, we think that natural gas is a great transition for them as we move towards a lower or completely carbon-free future at some stage. So it's a mixture of everything. But the main point I hope I made is that actually these countries need everything. You know, they will need fossil fuels, they will need renewable energy, they will need, I think, probably nuclear energy too, but of course that's a live debate today as we see what's unfolding in Japan. So it's all of the above.
Peter, thank you. Big challenges, perhaps big opportunities, certainly a big issue. So thank you for being brave enough to stand up in front of us today and share some of these things. And we'll hear from you perhaps more in a moment after the panel. So what we'd like to do now is move on to the next phase of activity. I'd like to invite to the stage Guy Ruddle, a great friend of business in the community, head of visuals at the Telegraph Media Group. I'm always promoting people when I announce them. The most important guy at the Telegraph Media Group, who's going to lead us through our panel discussion this morning on some big ideas. So, yes. Guy, over to you.
Good. So, welcome again, everybody. What we've got to do now for the next just under an hour is we've got 5 key people who are going to tell us what they're doing in their businesses to think in different ways, to look at the future, to make it more sustainable. We're going to give them 5 minutes each. We're going to sit them down here in a big row, and then you are going to grill them in any way you like. I'm going to be strict with them on their 5 minutes so we get plenty of time for questions. So if you don't ask any, I'm going to look like a fool. And I don't want that to happen. So I think we'll just get straight on with it, and we'll start with our first guest, who, as I said, will speak for a little bit, and then we'll ask questions once everyone's spoken. Our first guest is the Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact, which is the, excuse me, the sort of global version of business in the community. His name is George Kell. George, please.